FX framework. They're modern forms utilizing the new Fluent UI design, and they're fully responsive, so you can work with them in different size devices, whether it's PC, tablet, mobile phone, and they also support some of the QuizCon custom columns as well. Now, these forms themselves are advanced. We support a number of different options here. So for example, custom columns, as I mentioned. So I'm going to show you an example of using countdown columns, hyperlinked columns with rich functionality, multi-row forms, so that idea of header and child items, so order details, expense lines. We can connect to documents, so we can store related files, one or more, associated with our form. We can do live calculated fields, so we enter a quantity, we enter a value, we can automatically calculate a total for each of our rows. I'm going to show you how to build up multi-page forms, either presented in a singular tabular experience or a wizard survey type mode, which you often get with paper and some electronic forms as well. And I'll also show you the different print options, including saving out to PDF. I'll expand on that by looking at other features such as form validation, default values, the sort of things which you expect in form applications. And we're going to be looking at it with two hats on today. So we'll be looking at it with what's come before. Historically, we might have used things like InfoPath or custom development to build our forms within SharePoint. And now we're increasingly, the other option is looking at Power Apps. But I think QuizCon Forms will offer you as richer functionality and a much easier path to usage. So these are applications which are very much designed with end users, business users in mind. They can be used by more technical users, and we'll also show you how they can be extended with scripts to build out further functionality. But bear in mind that what we'll show you is all built directly within the browser. So this doesn't require a SharePoint administrator or a SharePoint developer to set these sort of forms up. It's not a long learning curve in comparison to maybe historically InfoPath or now tools like PowerApps. So this is very much designed for and with the business end user in mind. Technically, it's very easy to install. So you can choose in the modern experience which of the different components of QuizCon Forms and the other related QuizCon apps are enabled on your site. And that's pretty much it in terms of an introduction. So let's dive into a demo now. And I'm going to look at a couple of different scenarios around sort of employee, business, people processes. And I picked some slightly different examples today. So instead of taking the classic example of doing expenses or a sickness form, I've taken two examples. One about managing employees and employee onboarding and maintaining employee records, and then one about managing the audit of a business location, an office, a warehouse, whatever it might be. And bear in mind, these are just examples to showcase the functionality, and of course you'll have your own specific forms requirements, but hopefully as part of this demo you'll understand the capability which QuizCon Forms offers. So I've moved over to the browser now, and I've got a SharePoint site. And as I said, to start with, I'll just show you a couple of examples, and then I'll show you how those have been built out. So here we are in a SharePoint list which is called employees. And this is our main list which we're going to populate and complete a form in. And we can see we've got a couple of columns here such as employee name, employee number, department, office location. And bear in mind we've got a couple of related lists here. So we've got a list which contains all of our departments. Note that some of those aren't active departments according to the way I've classified those as metadata. We've also got some offices and some locations which have a lookup column to the office. Okay, so just some simple columns which we want to use within our form. And if I return to my SharePoint list, so this is all data within SharePoint, as I said. And I come in here to complete a new form. You'll immediately see that whilst this has a SharePoint look and feel about it, this form itself has been customized using QuizCon Forms. So I've got a couple of tabs at the top here. I've got fields laid out across a structure, multiple columns in this case. My form is fully responsive, so I can adjust it accordingly, and the form will adjust to my specific needs to suit my different devices I'm working in. And as I start to complete this form, we'll see some of the additional functionality in QuizCon Forms. So firstly, I select a department. Now, those observant of you may notice that there are only 3 departments here. The marketing department, which was set as not active, is not shown in this list. So we can still maintain all the data in our related lookup list, maintain existing relationships, but we can filter, we can make and restrict which fields are shown, either based on a specific field or a view. Of course, we can have regular text fields, number fields, and we can do other things with drop-downs. So for instance, as I select an office, the location options will be filtered. This is the sort of functionality which was always slightly tricky to do, and continues to be tricky to do in products such as PowerApps. It's often you need to write a little complicated formula. Fine for maybe someone like myself who is a little bit more technical, but certainly a business user would find that quite hard to follow. They would require additional support to do that. I wouldn't need any of that to configure this within QuizCon Forms. Now, also one of the problems using SharePoint lists is you often have a lot of fields of information, so we can easily break that up across different tabs. So if I move across to the Asset tabs, you see I have another section to my form now visible to me. And in this case, I've got rows of data. So that long existing challenge with SharePoint about how do we have and manage child rows, as I said, order lines, expense lines. In this case, it's assets, which in a specific employee has. So I'm going to go and say, well, they've got a laptop, and I can say it was assigned, let's say today, and it has a value of £900. Notice I'm doing a total here, and I'll show you that further. So let's say we've assigned them a couple of phones, and we'll assign them yesterday, let's say, and they each have a value of, let's say, $500. So we can see we can do simple calculations on rows, and that's dynamic, that's live on screen. We don't need to save it before that calculation is done. I can also add additional rows in here or delete them. If I want to, I can include attachments. So if maybe I wanted to include a screenshot or a receipt of the device, I could do that. Or I could not include the attachments at all. And this information is going into related SharePoint lists. So there is an assets list on the left-hand side here, which those assets will be stored in and related to the primary item. Other things I can do is we can actually show relevant information as people follow in a process. So it might be as we complete a certain field or a certain condition is met, that other information on the form is shown. So very simply here as an example, Maybe I want to store some documents about the employee. If I tick that, I now am presented with the Documents tab. Equally, we can even control that based on user roles. So security, if a user belongs to a certain security group, they see certain forms or fields, and tabs within the form. So moving across here, we can see another way we can manage multiple related items. So as well as items, we can do documents. So I can come here and I can choose some files to upload. So let's say I've maybe got appraisal document, which I've done. I can come and add that in. I can add another row here. And I can select another document which I want to upload. So managing multiple documents in the context of a form. And there are many different scenarios in which that could be really useful. Maybe case management, for example, and you want to manage related resources and information and documents you've collected for that case. A great example of how you can use this document management capability. So there we go, a simple example. I can now save this form, and all of the information has been stored. So all of the core information in the form, as well as all the related assets in my asset list, and also the documents within my document library. And if I just go into my document library, in this case, I'm organizing them by folder. So I can see here that I've got specific folders created, and I can go in and see the relevant documents for that employee. So there's one example, showcasing things like repeating rows, showing and hiding fields, and also managing logic such as cascading lookup fields from multiple different lists. Let's take another example and look at a few of the other features for QuizCon Forms. So I've now got a site audit I want to do. I want to go and audit a location. So let's go and create a new record using this specific form. And again, we see a form with QuizCon Forms appear. Let's say we're doing a warehouse audit. I can select from my offices list. Now I've got a due date here, which automatically has a default value set. In this case, we're setting it as 3 days from now. So we can automatically set certain default values for our form the moment that is created. I mentioned that there's also certain special column types available. One of those is the countdown type. So in this case, I've got a countdown going until my due date is arrived. It might be that I've got a number of different actions I need to do from this audit, and this will allow me to see how long I've got left. Really useful in things like a support ticket, or maybe I've got some project milestones coming up and I want to see a countdown ticking within the context of the form. The other thing you'll notice is I'm not seeing the different tabs in this setup. And this is because we're using the wizard mode. And this is another example of how we can simply enhance the forms experience with a number of out-of-the-box scripts which QuizCon make available to you. And I'll show you this when we go into the building scenario. There's a number of pre-built examples which you can use. And then if you do have development resources, then you can potentially extend those further if you want to. So in this case, I actually follow a process. I then click next and it moves me on to the next stage of a form. A bit like maybe when you're filling out, a tax application or, finance for a new car, for example. So I'm now moved into an assessment stage on my form. Again, I showed you showing and hiding tabs. We can show and hide fields based on interactions. So maybe once I've done the risk assessment, I have to put a date in. Once I've done the relevant employee training, I need to put a date in. Okay, that's good enough for me. I'm going to continue. No, I'm not, because I've now put some validation on my form. I'm asking people to provide certain information. Maybe certain fields can't be blank, or maybe certain fields in certain combinations can't contain certain bits of information. So we can put validation in with our own custom messaging. Again, other column types we can support. Hyperlinks. I don't know if anyone else finds hyperlink fields in SharePoint quite frustrating, but I do. So you just have to enter a hyperlink. There's no way of linking easily to existing resources within your site. Well, we can do that here. And we get an experience which is familiar to us. So we can go in and look at recent documents, go and look in our OneDrive, go and look at anything within our site, or put in a link as well. So very easily allow us to link to the relevant resources, maybe existing documents within our site. When we're done, we can click Next. And in this case, I built a summary screen here. So at the end of my wizard journey, and quite typically when you're filling in some sort of application form, you would see a summary of all the information you've put in. And if you're happy with that, then you would come in and finish that. And again, that item has now been created. Now, doing any type of form-based process, an application, a submission of some description, you often want to print it. So QuizCon make a number of different print options available via their print apps, such as being able to print it itself or export it as a PDF as well, so save that as a PDF to then distribute or store appropriately. So again, simple form-based functions around things like print, which again are quite difficult to do with native SharePoint print. So that's our examples of forms. Now let's have a look at how we build some of those processes out. So I've switched over to a near identical site, but in this case my forms aren't created. So if I go to my employees list, I've just got a couple of simple fields set up. So let's immediately start to put in some of our extra fields. So let's immediately start to look at adding those lookup columns. If I click on QuizCon Apps, so you'll have seen that. I did that a little bit quickly, so let me just show you that again. Once I've got QuizCon Form apps installed into my tenant, so I've added them to my app catalog, they're available here within my specific list. And if I click on that, I'm then asked which of the apps I want to use. So in this case, I'm going to use the cascading lookup, which allows me to build much richer lookup columns. So I can either modify an existing column, although in this case I want to create a new column. So let's create a column called department. It asks me where's my target list. I can choose which column I want from that list. And then I can choose to filter in different ways. So in this case, I could filter based on a view, or I could filter based on a column in the list. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and add that column. Let's add a few other columns in. So let's add my office column. And then let's go and add in my location column. Now we're just going to set these columns up initially, and then I want to show you how I can then restrict those. So let's go and have a look back at my list itself, so my employees list. And you can see at this point, I'm showing all departments. And these columns have no effect on each other. So let's return to cascading lookup and look at how we can configure that in a little bit more detail. Firstly, let's select a department column. And within my departments list, I've actually got a view called active. So only showing the ones which are set to yes. So in this case, I'll actually say I only want to use the active view. And let's apply that setting. And secondly, I want to choose my location column. And now actually I want to filter this. So I want to make sure that it's only showing columns from my locations list based on the value which I've selected from Office. So to do that, I come back and I select my location column, which I've done here. And then I want to filter by a column in this list. So in this case, I want to choose Office. And I want to only choose options where Office is equal to Office from my target list. Let's save those settings. And now let's return to the employees list itself, and we can see the effect which has happened there. So if I come in and I create a new item now, now I am only presented with my active options in department. And dependent on what office I select, the location varies. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now let's have a look at the layout of my form itself. So again, to do that, we go into QuizCon Apps. And I go to Form Layout. And I can create a number of different tabs here. So let's have an initial tab, and we'll call it Employee Details. Okay, and then we can add a row in. We can say, well, what field do we want there? Let's maybe put the employee name. And the thing I really like about this is you can actually see it building up on screen. So you're going to know exactly what it's going to look like to the users. So I can select a department, and I can easily then just add in an additional column if I want to, even adjusting its width accordingly. And I will then also finally add in my office and my location. We can add in another tab, so let's pre-create one for our assets tab, and maybe just add our one column which we could add at the moment, maybe store documents. And I'll show you in a second how to add the assets piece. Let's just save this. Return to our employees list. And now if we create a new item, we've got that layout achieved with the different columns and the different tabs. Note there's also a default tab available to show all columns if you want to as well. And I'll show you where you configure that now. Before I do that, let's just show you how I complete and set up that repeating row, that sort of sub-table of related items. To do that, I've got an assets list here. So I've set up a list with various additional columns of information. And I'm going to relate that list now. And I do that by using the repeated row column. And I'm going to give my column a name. So in this case, I'm going to call it assets. Again, a bit similar to repeating rows. I select where am I getting this from. So in this case, I'm choosing my child location, my assets list. And then I start to build out which columns I want to include. So I select the columns for my repeating row list. So my asset name, my asset type, maybe the quantity, my value, and my total. Yeah. I can do other things like define the default number of rows. So 3 is okay. Do I want to allow users to add additional rows? Yes, sure. Maybe I want to give them a slightly more specific description for adding a new row. So in this case, add asset. I can check over that settings. I can even see how that's going to be formatted and even define additional totals. Giving that a name and saying, well, what does my total do? So in this case, I want it to sum. Yeah. So some options to configure how I want that to be presented. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to save it. We've now created a repeating row column in our employees list, and we can add that to our form. And if we go back to our assets tab here and add a row, you'll see that there's a column called asset. So that's our repeating row column, which we add to our form. And I mentioned about that all columns tab. If we don't want that displayed, we can untick it here at this point. Let's save those settings and return to the employees list. And quickly have a look at how that's looking now on our form. So there are my repeating rows added into my form. Finally, just having a look at another repeating row column type of documents. So pretty much exactly the same as we did before, but there's a few additional options if we're linking to a document library. So again, we give our columns a name. We select our target list, so our documents list. And we can specify what columns to include. So maybe the name of our file, and in this case I've got any other additional metadata which I would want to include. And if I want to, I can include a subfolder here. So I want each folder created or configured for each related item. And I want all the files stored in that. So really useful for general good filing practices. So they're not just all in one big list, but also we can do things like permissions associated to those documents. And as part of this, I can even then go and file those folders based on information from my form. So say, for instance, I want the folder based on the name of my employee. Again, I save that repeating row, and then I use form layout to add that in. And I can add a new tab, and let's call it documents. I can add that row in. And I can also specify conditions here. So this is where we can do conditions around that specific tab displaying or not displaying. So I could, for instance, choose my store documents is equal to yes. But there's other options here dependent on the field type. Even looking at things like current user value, like group membership, like I mentioned earlier. Let's save that. And then return to our employees list. Now if I create a new item, you see that I'm presented with two tabs, and my Documents tab shows dependent on that tick box. So very easy to configure that form. What other things I can do? Well, I can enhance that further, either using pre-built samples, which QuizCon make available to me, or if we do have access to development resources or you want to take that further, then also build those yourself. And I can do that with styles. So QuizCon make a number of standard styles available, such as tab styles. Yeah. Some people prefer default column widths to bring their form in a bit. It maybe if you're in your business use very large monitors universally, that might not deliver the best look and feel in your specific use case. So you might want to reduce or fix the width of certain columns. And there is also, really excitingly, the script editor capability to do a lot more with your form, enrich that form that little bit further. And again, QuizCon make a number of samples available to you, like how to do calculations on rows, very simple to put in, and then modify those to say, well, what is the name of your quantity field? What is the name of your price field? What is the name of your total field? It's very simple to modify those scripts. This is also where we get the tabulated form wizard option to walk people through a wizard-like structure as well. There's more detail here on how you can actually use that script editor and help resources as well. And this is continually expanding. QuizCon, we're going to offer ability to call out to and use profile data, so to look up information about the user and other examples as well. So constantly building and giving you more examples which you can build on and enhance your form experiences. So that shows you a little bit about customizing the form. Let's look at a couple of things from my other example. So my site audit. Now, as I've already shown you the basics of building the form, in this case, I'll just show you the specific extra bits which I did around this form. So if I go back into my QuizCon apps, so a few things to point out. By enabling things like print, I've got that saved to PDF and print options available to me. I've enabled my countdown column, and I can come in here and configure that column, so I can set up either a new column or select an existing column like my time to complete. I need to base that on a date column, so I need to either base it on time to a date or from a specific date. So in this case, I'm to my date. I can then define what that behavior is, and then define additional options like, am I showing seconds here or not, what my captions are, and whether what the labels are for days, hours, minutes as part of this setup of this column. So really easy to configure. What other options have I got available here? So we can do things like field validation. We saw that around the example of issues. So I can do that by coming in and looking at my field constraints. And I set up a rule here, and I can go and say, well, if this specific column is equal to or not empty or less than, I then say, well, what happens, what error message if it validates to fail? And in this case, if it's not empty, that's a success. So if it contains data, it's successful. Otherwise, put in this error message. So you could do things like if a field is less than a certain value, or doesn't contain a value under a certain condition. So if one field equals this and another field doesn't contain a value, validate in this way. So all sorts of quite complicated validation logic you can put in place. What about showing and hiding fields? Really simple to work with. And we do that via dynamic column permissions. So you can take this example of risk assessment date, where we can say it's disabled, show, hide, or disable. So whether we want it visible, whether we want to just lock it so it can't be set, or whether it's hidden completely. I really like this, so the context. So does this rule just apply to the initial experience? So you might want to just hide or disable certain fields when you're creating new items, but not when you're editing. And then what's the condition it occurs under? So when a certain other field equals something. So in this case, disable the risk assessment date when risk assessment is equal to no. And you can build those conditions up if you've got like multiple choices and you want different scenarios for different steps. Also, we can set things like default values as well. So in this case, I'm setting the due date. And obviously, with things like calculated columns, we can either use fields from our form or system values such as today. So in this case, just adding 3 days onto the current date as my default value. Again, really useful using that with field constraints. So you might set a default value which people can't initially change or can only change under certain conditions. So some really useful rules and validation. Finally, just looking at my form layout again. So I've built that up across a number of tabs. And I've also included a summary tab defining what columns I want within that summary tab. That might be all of the columns or just some specific columns laid out if I want to, in a different order as well, because that's sometimes what happens as part of a confirmation process. And finally, I've used that built-in script so that I can easily enable that wizard mode to get people to step through the form just using one of those pre-built scripts which QuizCon make available. I can do that in seconds. I can't quantify how long that would take to build in another form application, PowerApps, or whatever it might be. Now, I think I've talked a little bit too long for you, so let's just wrap up with a couple of slides, and I'm sure you'll got a few additional questions for me. So this is sort of a summary, but also looking at the alternatives, because obviously, you know, the reason you're looking at something like QuizCon Forms is you're wanting to build out form experiences. You have obviously got options like PowerApps available if you're like trying to build out quite complex business applications, connecting to all sorts of different data sources, but it's not always the easiest tool to work with when you're working with SharePoint forms, especially if you're a non-technical business user and you just need to build one form for your site. And that's very much where QuizCon Forms comes in. It's designed for that non-technical user, that business user. Hopefully I've shown you in the course of this webinar that you can configure very rich, modern SharePoint forms in minutes, not hours. There's not a big learning curve here. It's very much built for SharePoint. It's not an afterthought. It's not a bolt-on. It's not storing its data somewhere else. It's not designed for mobile first, but it's very much with mobile in mind, but also the desktop experience, the tablet experience. You're not having to build different modes, different forms for different devices. It's all built in one application. Finally, you can implement the business rules you need without coding. You can build and set default values, hide and show fields, tabs, lay it out in the way you want. But if you are a developer, you can extend that a bit further and include scripts, whether that's using some of the samples QuizCon make available or enhancing it further yourself. And that's it for me today. So thank you very much for your time. And now I'll open it up to any questions.